In December 1951, Muhammad Idris Al Senussi became the King of Libya. After coming to power, King Idris issued a decree abolishing the title of Majesty, stating that majesty belonged to God Almighty alone. Despite ruling over an oil-rich country, he lived a simple life with only a few material possessions. The peaceful and just rule of Idris Al Senussi lasted 18 years until he was eventually overthrown in a military coup led by Colonel Gaddafi. Idris Al Senussi was born in the year 1890 into a highly respected religious family known as the Senussi family. Idris Al Senussi received an Islamic education and spent his youth studying in various religious schools in Libya, Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, and the holy city of Mecca in Hijaz. By the time the Italians invaded Libya in 1911, Idris was now a well-respected religious scholar. After the Italian occupation of Libya, Idris Al Senussi led a large army of Libyan tribes and religious students in a guerrilla war against the Italian invaders in eastern Libya. The army of Idris Al Senussi managed to kill many Italian soldiers and gained control of a large amount of territory in eastern Libya. Idris continued his fierce resistance against the Italians, and they eventually gave up trying to conquer the region that was controlled by Idris Al Senussi, which made them sign a peace treaty with Idris in 1918. However, in 1922, Mussolini seized control of Italy. He broke the treaty with Idris Senussi and launched a surprise attack into eastern Libya. In the face of this unexpected attack, Idris Al Senussi was forced to retreat and took refuge in Egypt. When Idris fled the country in 1922, the Libyan resistance continued under the leadership of Omar al-Mukhtar. After the execution of Omar al-Mukhtar and the outbreak of World War II in 1939, Idris Al Senussi formed close ties with the British during his exile in Egypt. The British promised to provide Idris with military support in his war against the Italians. In August 1940, Idris Al Senussi entered Libya with a massive army to fight the Italians. Because of British support, Idris Senussi managed to defeat the Italians and remove them from Libya in 1943. In July 1944, Idris Al Senussi issued the first Libyan constitution, which guaranteed freedom of belief and thought, equality between the people, and freedom of worship. Idris also established a government based on an elected parliament. The Italians eventually declared their recognition of Libya's independence in 1946. King Idris united Libya under one state and established a constitution. Each province of Libya was given a high level of autonomy. Because of the tribal nature of Libyan society, King Idris established good relations with many Libyan tribes and gave all tribes equal representation in the Libyan parliament. Idris also appointed wise government advisors such as the Libyan poet and intellectual known as Ahmed al-Mahdawi. King Idris never used public money for personal endeavors. He refused to perform the Islamic pilgrimage of Hajj at the expense of the state, and insisted on performing Hajj on his own expense. After becoming king, Idris converted his houses in Al-Bayda and Benghazi into public schools. In the year 1950, Idris Senussi welcomed hundreds of Palestinian refugees to Libya and granted them free housing. In the year 1959, oil was discovered in Libya for the first time by a British company. King Idris was afraid of the long-term repercussions of this huge discovery. After being informed by a British man that oil had been discovered in Libya, King Idris replied, "I wish you people had found water. Water makes men work. Oil makes men dream." Despite his dislike of oil, King Idris utilized his massive oil wealth for the welfare of the people. Idris used this oil wealth in order to build modern infrastructure across Libya. King Idris Al Senussi granted Libyan nationality to workers from neighboring countries such as Tunisia, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, Chad, and Sudan in order to encourage immigration and increase the size of the workforce. He did not spend any money on personal luxury, and he continued his simple lifestyle even after the discovery of oil. In September 1969, while King Idris was receiving medical treatment in Turkey, a Libyan army officer known as Muammar al-Gaddafi took control of the country and overthrew the monarchy. King Idris did not have any bank accounts outside Libya, and he did not use public money for personal endeavors. Because of his limited wealth, the Turkish government paid for the expenses of his extended stay in his hotel during the coup, as he could not afford it. Gaddafi sentenced Idris to death, therefore he could not return to Libya. When Gaddafi came to power, the stable and peaceful era of King Idris came to an end, and Gaddafi's era of extravagance, repression, and torture began. Gaddafi imprisoned many of the leaders of the Libyan resistance against the Italians, who had contributed to creating the modern state of Libya. Many of Idris Al Senussi's family members and fellow anti-colonial resistance fighters were imprisoned by Gaddafi. For example, in 1970, Gaddafi imprisoned Sheikh Abdul Hamid al-Abbar, who was a Libyan freedom fighter and a companion of Omar al-Mukhtar. When some Libyan people visited Sheikh Abdul Hamid in prison, they stated, "How can Gaddafi imprison you when you are a warrior who fought alongside Omar al-Mukhtar?" He replied, "If Omar al-Mukhtar was alive today, Gaddafi would have imprisoned him too." After Gaddafi seized control of Libya, Idris Al Senussi never returned to the country. He passed away in Cairo in 1983. Idris Al Senussi was a ruler who brought stability to Libya. He was a kind-hearted leader who never imprisoned or killed his fellow Muslims, and a freedom fighter who resisted the Italian invaders. He was also a religious scholar who wrote over 40 books.